At least for this day, there is good news to report from the Middle East. There is joy really on all sides of this conflict. And I can't remember the last time that was said. It's been a long, long time. How much longer that'll last, we'll get to that in a second. But at least don't miss the chance to actually celebrate that something good happened. What you're seeing on the screen right here is some of the Israeli hostages. There were 20 that were still alive, that were being reunited with their family and their friends, and obviously a whole ton of celebration and joy back with that. You also had similar scenes in the Gaza Strip, where there were a lot of their hostages that had been released, and a lot of the prisoners that had been held. Apparently, many thousands were actually held, Palestinians. Just detained, not charged with anything, just detained by the Israelis and interrogated. Many of them were tortured and whatnot, but at least 1,700 of them have now been released. There's still more to go, but you see a lot of the celebrations that are going on there. So on both sides of this, you see a lot of people really happy about that. What remains to be seen is what all is going to happen with this, and can this enthusiasm be carried over, and the emotions of the day carried forward to be able to get phase 2 done, because this was phase 1, which was agreed to by all the parties, and the much thornier issues are in phase 2, where you have issues like the withdrawal of the Israeli Defense Forces. You have the how far they're going to withdraw to, who's going to rule in the Palestinian areas, what are the circumstances regarding self-rule, getting all the food aid in, of course, that has begun, so good on that. But there's still a lot more to figure out there. And then the other issues like the reconstruction, who is going to pay for that? Who's going to do the work, who's going to provide security inside of the Gaza Strip, who's going to be the policing agent, who's going to authorize that, etc. All these really, really difficult issues still have to be determined. But also today, aside from those scenes of joy that were in the Gaza Strip, as well as in Israel, was in Egypt, in the next door, where there was a big press conference today where there were leaders from literally all over the world and the region that were gathered to sign this. The phase 1 deal was signed by the leaders of course, President Trump of the United States, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey signed the original ones. Curiously, the Israelis were not there. They did not sign that document. Trying to figure out some of the reasons why on that, but at least so far, they were not involved with that. But there's lots of difficult things that are going to have to be figured out here. And we also have to look at the sober, I guess, score in all of this, in that the Palestinians have officially had lost more than 67,000 total people that were killed, men, women, and children. A significant majority of that were women and children. 170,000 people were wounded. And of course, as you probably recall, many, like children, have had to have amputations and other kind of medical support without the use of anesthesia or medicines, because those were blocked and prohibited by the Israeli side from getting in for a long time. You may also be aware that there are other death tolls that are suggested by Western sources, not by Palestinian or Hamas sources, but by Western sources, say that the actual death toll could be closer to 600,000. We'll probably be able to ascertain what that actually was in the weeks and months to come, assuming, of course, that this stays peaceful and that the war does not resume. Because as they talk about doing the reconstructions, they talk about clearing out the rubble, they're going to find out what their real casualty levels were of the things that were buried underneath there. My guess is just doing an analysis of the moonscape landscape that Gary shows plenty of times about, especially in Gaza City and Rafah and several of the other towns and villages in the Gaza Strip. Probably that upper limit is going to be closer to the truth. It's just hard to imagine that there would only have been 67,000 out of 2.3 million was the initial population when this thing began. It's hard to imagine that only 67,000 were killed and all that, with all that massive level of destruction. But we'll find out about that. The UK has taken the lead and said that they are willing. Yeah, that's the one, especially when you see all that. It's just, well, that's pretty hard to imagine that only 67,000 people in all of that were killed when there was so many millions living there. before that. UK has taken the lead to rebuild the Gaza Strip. They're going to first have to worry about clearing out the rubble, then rebuild homes, etc. All that will have to be done concurrent with other phase two negotiations, like who's going to provide security, who's going to provide the policing, and all those, the self-governance, etc. Those things all have to go hand in hand. So you see, there's still a lot of very, very difficult things to go along, to be decided. And one of the key issues is going to be, does everybody really want peace? Now, in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt today, all those leaders were gathered there. Trump was just in a real celebratory mood. Kept calling out all the different leaders that were there by name and making some comment about them. And it was really a good moment, and lots of smiles and backslapping, and everybody was really happy. But in Israel, we're not real clear where this is going to go and what they're going to be happy with. Now, I want to get to some of the comments that were made there, because President Trump gave a speech before the Israeli Knesset, their parliament, and then also Benjamin Netanyahu made several key statements, which I think bear pointing out and talking about. First of all, and actually an interview after that meeting was over, after that speech was given, President Trump was asked one of the things that set the stage. How did this peace come about in the first place?
When did you know that Hamas was going to release the hostages?
Well, I'll tell you, I think it really started when we took out the nuclear capability of Iran. When you look at what they had, you couldn't have made this deal if somebody's sitting over there with a nuclear weapon over your head. And I think when we did that, and there were other obviously very warlike things that we did over the course of 4 or 5 years, if setting the table.
Yes, see, part of my concern about that is that President Trump seems convinced that his, quote, warlike actions are what set the stage to get this back. And curiously enough, he says, yes, the getting rid of their nuclear program, the Iranian nuclear program, is what caused this, because they're not going to make the deal, the Hamas side, he means, if there's this nuclear weapon hanging over Israel's head. Well, the fact is, there is no nuclear weapon hanging over Israel's head. There was no nuclear weapon hanging over Israel's head. By all accounts, the Iranians had a nuclear capacity, and that could have gone to a weapons program. But by all accounts, to include the United States, the Great Britain, the IAEA, really every source. The only one that I've heard contrary is, surprisingly, Israel. But every other country has said all the way through that there was no nuclear weapons program, only that they had the capacity that they could sprint to a bomb should they have desired to do so. So there was no Iranian nuclear bomb heading over anyone's head. The only nuclear weapons that in the region, anyway, organic to the region, are in Israel, that were hanging over everyone else's head. And you see that fact that those missiles existed and that capability existed certainly doesn't keep the place safe from a lot of other activities that were going on. So you really couldn't argue that there was a nuclear program, and the elimination of it and all the other things. And I think he's talking about this Soleimani attack. He could well mean also the Israeli destruction of the embassy in Syria that Israel did before, or the assassinations in Iraq that they used against a lot of the Iranian people, the assassinations in Tehran, or, of course, the multiple rounds of strikes back and forth between the two. But President Trump seems to be tying together all of those activities with bringing peace here. That's somewhat troubling if you think that you can achieve peace by pummeling other people and using lethal military power, because I don't think there's any evidence at all that that's the case. In fact, a lot of this was, I think, done despite a lot of that. And really, from the United States, I'm talking about regarding Iran, within the Strip, there's no question that 2 years of just being dismantled and large number of people being killed inside of the Gaza Strip, for sure, was the big movement in that caused the Hamas side to take the actions that it did. Although it bears repeating here again and pointing out, in light of that comment, that we now know for sure by the Israeli press that the Hamas side was willing to release their hostages on day 3. We could have gotten through this already. And again, earlier this year, Hamas was willing to release all the hostages to end the war then. So this could have ended with a lot less bloodshed than already happened. So don't learn the wrong lessons. Now I want to go back to the actual speech that President Trump made. In this first one here, he's going to be talking about how, again, he thinks kind of the lethal action led to peace.
We dropped 14 bombs on Iran's key nuclear facilities, totally, as I said originally, obliterating them. And that's been confirmed, and everybody understands it. Together we stopped the #1 state sponsor of terror from obtaining the world's most dangerous weapons. And if you think about it, if we didn't do that, and assuming we made the same deal that we have today, there'd be a dark cloud over this deal. And #1, it wouldn't happen because the other Arab and Muslim nations really wouldn't feel comfortable making the deal that we have now, right? If Iran had that nuclear weapon.
Those things aren't even connected. Iran didn't have a nuclear weapon. You didn't prevent them from having it because that they weren't making one in the first place. And whatever has happened, despite these repeated claims of obliterated everything, most evidence suggests that they were harmed. And by the way, even the U.S. initial intelligence suggested that the most likely course was that it was set back a few months. And the general that was in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency that made that assessment was summarily fired because he gave information that the president didn't like. So instead of saying, hey, here's what we actually think, it's like, shut up, don't want to hear it. The only thing I want to hear is somebody agreeing with what I said, that it's been obliterated. And now, of course, you don't hear any more comments about anything other than, sure, it was obliterated by everybody that's at least that's been saying anything publicly. But again, we have to point out, even with the alleged knocking out of an Iranian deal, the idea that somehow there was a connection made between all of the leaders around the Middle East with the alleged nuclear weapon up there, that doesn't make any sense even. Well, they have been clamoring without exception from the beginning for this to be shut down, this war to be shut down, for the genocide that Israel was inflicting upon the Palestinian people, for the attempt at escalate or ejecting all of the people out of that area, the ethnic cleansing. So these regimes, long before these strikes that happened in Iran, were screaming for this to happen. So now then to literally change history and say they wouldn't have before they took that out when they were already doing it before then, it's just a little bit dishonest, if we'll just be blunt and say it. But now then Trump is saying, hey, let's let bygones be bygones, because now, sure, we blew up a bunch of stuff in Iran, but hey, maybe we can have peace now.
In the opinion of everybody, all powerful in the Middle East, they took a big hit, didn't they? Didn't they take a big hit? Boy, oh boy. They got hit from one side, from the other. And you know, it would be great if we could make a peace deal with them. And I think that's big. Would you be happy with that? Wouldn't it be nice, I think? Because I think they want to. I think they're tired. Somebody said, sir, they're starting their nuclear program again. I said, let me tell you something. They're not starting anything. They want to survive. The last thing they want to do is start digging holes again in mountains that just got blown up and start. They're not doing it. They want to survive, okay?
Okay, do I need to say this out loud? We had a peace deal with Iran. We had a nuclear control deal with Iran. The JCPOA, the nuclear deal that was negotiated during the Obama administration in 2015. Now, President Trump came into office and immediately got rid of that because, well, he didn't like Obama. And one can imagine that many of his pro-Israeli friends encouraged him down that path. More on that in a minute. But you see that the deal that was in place then had significant curtailment on the Iranian, even the civilian nuclear processing capability. Very, very small. I want to say it was 3.67% was the maximum that they had. They had international inspectors on site to validate that they didn't go beyond that they had very limited amounts of stockpiles that they could maintain on their territory. So all of those things were in place. And there were plenty of people that were there to make sure that they accomplished it. And when they cheated, they were there to set it right and to make sure. Some of that did happen, and it was corrected over the years. Then, of course, President Trump, 3 years later, came in and got rid of it. And then he said at the time, don't forget this either, He certainly doesn't want to remind you on that stage, but I'll be kind enough to do it for him. He said that he was going to get out of that bad deal to negotiate a better one, a better deal he was going to negotiate. What happened? From 2018 until he left power in January 2021, did it get renegotiated? Did he provide a better deal? That's what he promised us, but it didn't happen, did it? As a matter of fact, over the years, it didn't happen right away. Actually, Iran said, just go back to the deal. If the Americans and the Europeans will just honor their deal, we'll honor ours. And then we didn't, because we unilaterally pulled out of it. And then Iran said, okay, well, then we're going to start to expand our capabilities in all these different areas. And as they did, of course, we howled about it, but they kept doing it, saying, well, if you'll just get back into the deal and abide by your side of it, then we will go back to our side as well. So they were always saying they were willing to have a negotiated settlement that would go back to what it was before, which was a severe limitation with external eyes and monitoring devices to make sure that they adhered to it. Now, those who didn't like it will always go to this claim that, yeah, but we couldn't go everywhere. So maybe they were hiding something. So that is a theoretical. It's a hypothetical. Maybe they were, but that would also mean that it wouldn't be able to be found. And there was lots of devices and things that you can monitor from the air and even some from space that would give you a pretty good idea if anything ever happened. We don't have any information that anything did ever happen at some location other than what we already had and what we were monitoring. But in every case, or in any case, they were severely constrained from what they have that we know about it. And we know that it expanded because we had these inspectors there until we went in there and struck the Iranian facilities. And to this day, there are still no inspectors on the ground. Iran continues to say, we are willing, theoretically, to consider a negotiated deal to get back into one, but there has to be give and take. It can't just be us coming in and telling, here's all the terms you're going to abide by and we're going to do nothing. That's not how deals work. That's not how this one's going to, if it's going to get into. But when you claim, boy, it'd be great if we had peace, you got to acknowledge we already had it and we destroyed it already. So it's going to be a hard sell to get Iran to go back now and say, we'll try it again after we abided by our, for the most part, abided by our terms before. You got rid of it, didn't abide by your half of it, and then you bombed us. So those things all have to be overcome. I hope that happens anyway. And I think that it is still possible, but only with significant gives on our part and a willingness to actually engage in win-win diplomacy. If you're not willing to say we're going to allow the Iranian side to have some kind of a win that they think, then you will never have a deal. You will never have peace. And the likelihood is that we will go back in and we'll have more military strikes in the future. I hope it doesn't happen, but that's kind of the basic line that's set up for this. Trump's not the only one that was talking about the Iranian nuclear issue. And as a matter of fact, Netanyahu also, in given his telling of this day, said, listen, all of our objectives have been met, and that's one of the reasons we went to peace now.
In response to this barbaric attack on October 7th, Israel did what it had to do. With indomitable courage, we set out to defend our people, to defeat our enemies, and to release our hostages. Our heroic soldiers fought like lions. They fought on the front lines of civilization and barbarism. Israel achieved amazing victories over Hamas and the entire Iran terror axis. Sinwar, Dev, Hania, Nasrallah, Assad, they're all gone. Iran's nuclear weapons and ballistic missile program, with your enormous help, Mr. President, rolled back. Half the Houthi leadership wiped out.
So let's just look at that objectively. So Netanyahu claims that all of his objectives were met. Now, what he was talking about there weren't objectives. Those were not objectives on October the 7th, 2023. Those ended up being actions that happened afterwards, and they were tactical and strategic tasks of various types, some operational. But were those the objectives? Now, the objective set was to destroy Hamas, to bring peace and security back to the Israeli people. That was the objective. Has that objective been met? I would argue that it has not. Now, On the operational and tactical level, however, he has some justification, because without a question, the entire Hamas military wing of their organization has been absolutely decimated, and it is far, far less militarily capable today, not a fraction of what it was on the 6th of October, 2023. The Houthis have been severely attacked and a lot of harm. A lot of their senior leaders have been killed. Hezbollah has been severely gashed from what it was before. At one point, virtually their entire leadership was decapitated across the board. You see that Syria under Bashar al-Assad is now gone. And you see that there has been a lot of damage done to Iran. So in terms of those actions all happen. So you can argue that at least in the military balance in each one of those, you can say that Israel increased its capacity and diminished the capacity on the other side. But did that reach their objective? This is what's important to understand. Did this bring peace to Israel? I argue not only has it not brought peace to Israel, Israel is now far less secure today than it was on the 7th of October of 2023. And the reason is not hard to figure out. First of all, let's take a look in the Gaza Strip area. As I have been saying from the outset, and have observed from my own personal combat experience in Iraq and Afghanistan especially, is that when you go in and you kill so many people, innocent people, in the process of going after what you consider to be your enemy combatants or the terrorists, or however you want to, whatever title you want to put on them, doesn't make any difference. But when you kill so many innocent people in there, people who were not part of the Hamas organization, then you generate more hatred of you and more opposition. Especially the male family members of so many of these women and children and elderly that were killed as a part of this. What do you think they're going to do? Just not knowing anything about counterinsurgency tactics or theory or anything like that, just on a human level. If somebody comes in and kills a whole bunch of innocent people, allegedly going after what they considered an enemy to themselves, and so many, and they kill your family members, your children, or your wife, or your grandparents, what do you think that the people who survived that are going to think and do? Are they going to say, darn it, I guess old Pops there shouldn't have done anything. He messed with the hornet's nest, and now we're paying the understandable price. Well, all right, well, let's just move on now. I mean, come on, man. That's not going to happen. It didn't happen in anybody's life, much less in a region like this that already had the extraordinary level of history and hatred of the Israeli side because of how the entire population had been treated since 1947. All the way through. And I just did a show the other day. You can go to our channel and look at it. The actual history, what happened before 10/7. History didn't start on that day, folks. 2023. It went a long way before that. And that makes a lot more what happened understandable. And when you look at that history in comparison or in combination to the last 2 years, and you try to project what may be going forward, there's going to have to be some pretty big changes going on, or all you have done is just sow deep, deep seeds of future violence and future unrest. Because these people are going to want revenge. And the only way that you even have a possibility of hope of not having those seeds sprout is to give the population some kind of reason to find a different path, some kind of reason to think there is a hope and a benefit to your side to not follow the natural path, to not go after the revenge seeds and bring up that bitter fruit, which of course never works. All it does is continues the cycle, and it will always be reacted to by the opposite side. The only way that you can stop that human condition, however, is to have some kind of a peace and a hope. And that comes into the phase 2 part. And that is where I fear that Israel will make its ultimate strategic failure, and that they will not do that. That I actually fear the greater probability is that now that they've got all their hostages back and there's no more leverage at all on the Hamas side, that the Israeli side may find some pretext to go back into a conflict and just continue to kill a lot of the people in the Palestinian Strip, and to continue to try to do ethnic cleansing, to try to get them out through this other way. That's what I fear is going to happen. But that is what's going on inside the Strip. Then you look at all this, the attacks jump to the Houthis. if this all stops, if we stop the war here and there's any kind of stability within the Gaza Strip, all these other places too, who have viewed all of these things, and now not only the civilian casualties inside of Gaza, but then the casualties they themselves have suffered in Sana'a, in Beirut, in southern Lebanon, in Syria, really, and certainly in Iran. Those folks aren't going to forget either. They never do. No, people just don't forget in that part of the world. I mean, this has been a long, long time. These kinds of violence, revenge cycles continue going on through. I mean, it happens a lot. And sometimes these seeds take many, many years to sprout. But if you don't give all of these different people groups reason to think that they have a place in a peaceful country, in a peaceful region, that they have a chance to live, not worrying about Israeli jets flying over and dropping bombs, or Israeli missiles landing on them, or assassins showing up out of nowhere, or drones flying over their head and killing them in their sleep, like they have done in so many cases. If you don't have a world where those people don't have to worry about that, then you keep alive within them also the need not just for revenge, but for the subjugation and the destruction of Israel. You provide ammunition mentally for them to want to do the very thing that we claim we're trying to prevent. Just having a strong military doesn't keep you safe. You have to have policies that go along with it so that you remove the reason why anybody wants to come after you. That's part of national defense and national security. It's not just about how many damn planes and bombs and missiles you have. It's about how you don't present a threat to everyone in the region. Don't give them a reason to want to seek revenge and to try and to do something to undercut you in an attempt to just have peaceful conditions within their own region. That's the part that I believe that there have been so darn many seeds of potential future violence and conflict that have been planted deep. And look, all today, like in Sharm el-Sheikh, a lot of happy faces there and backslapping and congratulations and champagne's corks popping in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, even some places in the Middle East. That's all great for today. But you've got to change some things about what you do going forward, or there's going to be a lot of bitterness coming in later as a result of the things that have been done here. Now, a couple of last things I want to talk about here is the idea that who runs who in this dynamic between the United States and Israel. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu went to some lengths today to say thank you to President Trump for some of the things that he has done. In so doing, I think it kind of illustrates the real question and makes the question a lot more poignant. Who is the senior member of this partnership? Because Benjamin Netanyahu, to thunderous applause, a lot of it by Trump himself, is going to rattle off this long list of things for which they are very grateful to President Trump. As they say, each one of these, just ask yourself, each one of them, who benefits the most? Is it Israel or is it the United States? Whose interests were served by these actions that he's going to thank President Trump for? What are the national interest, security, economic, and otherwise, of the United States? Then who is the interest, economic, security, and otherwise of Israel? In those cases, who benefited the most? And in some cases, you can ask, did America benefit at all? Here's the list.
This is your first visit to Israel since you recognize Jerusalem as our capital and moved the embassy here. Thank you, President Trump, for that. There are many other reasons to thank you since your last visit here. Thank you for recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Thank you for standing up to the lies against Israel in the United Nations. Thank you for recognizing in your 2020 peace plan our rights in Judea and Samaria, the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Thank you for brokering the historic Abraham Accords. Abraham, Eskemei Avraham. Thank you for withdrawing from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. Thank you for supporting Operation Rising Lion and for your bold decision to launch Operation Midnight Hammer. Boy, is that, you got to hear this. This is the most fitting name ever named for a military operation, because a little after midnight, you really hammered them. My friends, this is only a partial list, but it's enough to affirm what I've said time and again. Donald Trump is the greatest friend that the state of Israel has ever had in the White House.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's the applause that you want there, because virtually every one of those recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, that had been a contentious issue which every American president had rejected because of the emotional issue that it would and the antagonism that it would cause in the Middle East of the other Arab regimes. President Trump did that. Then he recognized the Golan Heights. Nobody had recognized it, not a president of the United States, not anybody else in the region or the world, because that was captured in war and it was under UN resolutions that was supposed to be returned to Syria, etc. Didn't care, but Trump recognized it. One of the bigger ones, UN support. Without President Trump and the United States, and this also includes not just President Trump, this is many of the others, with the blocking of almost every negative action that has ever been passed by the United Nations, we literally gave them carte blanche diplomatic cover. Anything that came down, no matter how accurate it was, no matter how just and moral it was, we blocked it every single time. Every single time. I think there was a handful of exceptions over decades of time. Trump, of course, would not do any of that. So without that diplomatic support, Israel would not have been able to have done anything near what it has done over the past 2 years in the Gaza Strip. He also said in Samaria and Judea, that's the West Bank, that's known as Judea and Samaria inside there. He says, recognized our authority over that. Well, that is part of what is owned by the other 3 or so million Palestinians that rarely gets common information in today's media sphere in the United States or in the Western world in general. But while most have been focused on the Gaza Strip, there has been a lot going on with settlers and a lot of violence against the Palestinian people there. And they still want the United States to support them in annexing that outright, which of course would be another huge flagrant violation and just another way to take the land of those who actually are the rightful owners of it. And that is a huge issue, which is also not done. Again, there's a lot of violence that continues to go in there, both from the Israeli military, the police, and definitely settler violence, which corresponds counter violence from the other side. And then it just continues that cycle. So that's still a hot zone. No one's talking much about that one. Then, of course, he talks about the Abraham Accords. And that's one that's kind of neutral in the U.S. It would be good. I actually when it came out, I applauded it. I said, anything that moves into peace in the Middle East, I'm for it. But that is primarily the benefit of Israel, because they want to have no problems with all the other regimes so that they're free to do anything that they want to do as well. Then, of course, he gets back to this I mentioned earlier. He bragged on President for getting rid of the terrible JCPOA, the nuclear deal, which was an absolute disaster for everybody. That's what laid the foundation for this strike here, because without having gotten out of the JCPOA, Iran would continue to have been living in its constrained world. There would continue to be international inspectors there to make sure that they abided by it, and there would continue to be even less of a possibility of having a nuclear breakout. So the only reason why you want to get rid of that is because you don't want to live in peace with Iran. So President Trump said a minute ago that I would love to see that we have a peace deal with Iran, but nobody in Israel that's in authority wants that. They want to destroy Iran. They want to try regime change again. God only knows why, because it almost never works out. I think that some have suggested that getting rid of Bashar al-Assad may be a victory. The jury's still out on that one. We'll find out what happens over time. But so far, that's what Israel thinks worked there, and they would like to see it work out here too. They don't want to have anybody in Israel, in any of these regimes that are opponent to them. So they think, well, we're not going to do peace with them, so we'll destroy them and see if we can get these Abraham Accords to get everybody else, so we have a docile environment. Makes sense that you would want to have an area where you don't have to worry about your neighbors. But again, if you seek that and you try to accomplish it by making enemies of a bunch of the other people in the region, you're never going to have peace. Nevertheless, getting rid of the JCPOA was only in Israel's favor because that's what they wanted, not because of the United States. It did not help us at all. It actually made our life more difficult. And then, of course, Operation Midnight Hammer, which was the attack against Iran here. So every one of those things were in Israel's benefit. It helped their perceived national interest. It did nothing for our national interest. It's not even a win-win between the United States and Israel. It's just, here's what Israel wanted. Here's what we're going to do. No matter the cost to us, no matter how many missiles that we had to spend of our own and our money, significant amounts patrolling the Red Sea against the Houthis, or to be going after supplying the bombs and the missiles, to be going after the Palestinians in both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, by the way. So a lot of that stuff goes in to help that too. Or without the bombs, the Israel needed to go into southern Lebanon, to fire into Beirut, to fire into Syria, the ground incursions where they took even more territory in Syria after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, and of course, all of the ordnance that's gone into Iran. All of that has been supported, the lion's share, by the United States. So it has cost us a lot to go down that path. And no one's even talking about any kind of reciprocity. In fact, we've spent, according to the, I think it's the War Project at Brown University, about $31 billion. $31 billion in the last 2 years on all of that. Diminished our stockpiles too, because that's not even so much a numbers issue and a dollar figure as it is a capability and a stockpile. So it has further drawn down our stocks, making our national security even more vulnerable than it was before. Somehow no one seems to be concerned about that in the White House. I am. But that's part of the cost of all this. This has not been cost-free for us, and Israel has been virtually the sole benefactor, at least the leadership in Israel has been. One last thing I want to show you here, because it looks like that for all of these platitudes and all of these backslaps and everything from Netanyahu to Trump, that he went on there in his speech and seemed to want to try to return the favor for his good friend, Bibi Netanyahu, in his legal problems.
This man is a good man right here. These two men are good men right here. Hey, I have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon? Give him a pardon. By the way, that was not in the speech, as you probably know. But I happen to like this gentleman right over here, and it just seems to make so much sense. You know, whether we like it or not, this has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. This has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. And cigars and champagne, who the hell cares about that?
So if you don't know, Benjamin Netanyahu is still facing lots of legal troubles in his country. A lot of this has been put off because of this 2 years of war, because he was on the verge and had even during some of this still had to attend some of the court hearings, and he is at legitimate risk of being put in jail, of being convicted of crimes and put in jail. And so President Trump just says, yeah, don't worry about that. You know what? As long as he won this war, give him a free pass on everything. It's not going to make any difference. Nobody in Israel is going to listen to what President Trump says on that issue. It's going to continue to follow its course there. But, that mentality just says, hey, if you have a good outcome, doesn't matter what you do. That's not a good law and order kind of thing. That's not a good morality situation. If you want to try to present yourself as morally superior to others, whatever, that's not helpful, and it's not going to work in any case. And listen, that last comment he made right there about this man right here, Netanyahu, is going to go down in history as one of the great war makers. No, it ain't going to happen that way, folks. I'll just go out categorically and say here on the 13th of October, 2025, that I bet in 10 years' time, maybe a lot faster than that, but at least in 10 years' time, and almost all beyond that, people are going to look back and say that Netanyahu was one of the biggest disasters that ever happened to Israel, because he planted all of these seeds that popped up with bitter fruit over time and caused Israel so much more trouble than would have been the case without it. And of course, preceding all of this, there's been decades when Netanyahu's been in power as a prime minister and other politician, to where he, for example, and I know some people don't accept this, it's way out there, it's been approved, it's been confirmed even in the Washington Post, New York Times, etc., is that he himself, despite his vehement denials, actually helped support Hamas. He used Hamas as a balance against the Palestinian Authority to keep them at each other's throat, so that they didn't come together and form one unified Palestinian people between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, so that they would have a chance to have a unified position and therefore a country of their own. So that there would be a two-state solution, or even a one-state solution where the Palestinian people had some sort of contiguous land, etc. He wanted to prevent that. So by keeping them at each other's throat and to keeping them, in this sequence, back and forth about violence and all this, be able to show, look, they're not trustworthy partners. We don't have a partner here where we can do it. That was his intent. That was his goal. It was his objective. And he took a lot of pains to make sure that happened. That's why it was so ironic when he condemned Qatar for giving safe haven to known terrorists, i.e. the Hamas side, when they tried to assassinate a month or so ago, the negotiators for the Hamas side. Qatar was like, you got to be kidding me. You're the one that asked us to do this. You're the one that helped support it. We gave this money, most of which was funneled by you for the purpose of keeping the Hamas in power. And then Netanyahu just wants to say something different. And too many in the West will literally believe he can say anything. He could tell you that this is a glass of wine right here. It's really good too. And people can look at it. They can see the picture. And when they say it looks kind of like highlighter to me, it's a glass of wine, red wine to be specific, and it's really good. You should try some. And too many of the followers will just go, okay, guess it's a red glass of wine then. Because he is so convincing and so compelling in the statements that he makes. You think, well, there must be something wrong, because people can't lie that easily. It's hard to lie. I mean, you would mock me if I tried to tell you the same thing here, like any ordinary person was, because you can't lie that easily. So since he has that much conviction, I guess it's true. That's kind of what that's kind of how it strikes on people, because you want to believe in, many in the West too. Certainly many in Israel, many in the United States. They want to believe, and they can't imagine that he would be saying these things. It's just, graphically untrue. And yet that's kind of where we are. And that will wear off over time, whether he ends up going to jail or just reaches the end of his political term. I don't know. But once the emotion of him being in power goes away and time starts to pass, then subjective reasoning comes back into play, and people will look back and they will see that his policies were absolutely disastrous for the Israeli people, and obviously even more so fatally for so many of the Palestinians. But we'll see how it's going to work out there. I just wanted to point out these things here. Great that today is a good day. So many people got their loved ones back in Israel. They got their loved ones back on the Palestinian side. And I am happy for all of those people, because they're just regular people, and they deserve to be happy. And they've been under so much misery for so long. Let's give them their day here. But much more so, I pray that enough pressure can be brought to bear by whether it's Western countries or other Arab regimes or other countries, that they say, hey, let's actually end this deal. Don't let this be a precursor to a restarting of the violence in the Gaza Strip, and under whatever pretext, or more violence in another war against Iran, which would be bad for the entire region and every country involved. I pray that somehow peace can find a way to work its way through there. That's what we're hoping for, and that's what we pray for. Thank you very much, folks. Really appreciate you today. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't on your way out, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.